My name is Leonard Nakamura. Welcome to Northwest Village Network's presentation on the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. I would like to welcome the many attendees who are not members of Northwest Village Network. The Northwest Village Network is a community of people helping each other age in place in the Northwest Philadelphia neighborhood and neighboring areas. The presenter is Julia Nakhleh, the point person for the Climate Reality Project in Pennsylvania on RGGI. Julie lives in Collegeville, is a trained climate reality project leader, is active in the Girl Scouts, and a member of the planning group for the Community Net Zero Education Project. The Climate Reality Project, as many of you know, was founded by Al Gore and is a global effort to build activism for climate change from the ground up. The Community Net Zero Education Project, of which I am also a member, is a local group in the Philly region aiming to provoke local conversations and education. We focus on the positive steps individuals and groups can take to lower greenhouse gases and improve our resilience to climate change. You are welcome to join these groups. Sign-up information is in the chat. Julia, thank you so much for presenting to us on this important topic for climate change in Philadelphia. Please unmute yourself and take it away.
All right, let me share my screen here. All right, so I'm here tonight to talk about the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It is known as RGGI. So I'm sure we have people here with various understandings of what RGGI is. So we'll start from the beginning. RGGI is an interstate cap and invest program. So the way RGGI works is fossil fuel fired power plants purchase carbon dioxide allowances. An allowance is essentially a permit to pollute, but one allowance is worth 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So then these power plants can use those allowances. They can either use them for themselves or they can trade them. The number of allowances capped, reducing every year, thus guaranteeing a reduction in carbon dioxide emissions. The proceeds from RGGI are reinvested in the state to benefit consumers and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And we'll go in more detail later on the ways that it can be invested. RGGI is a proven market-based approach to emissions reduction. It has existed since 2009. There are currently 11 states that are members of RGGI, with Pennsylvania poised to be the 12th. So the current ones are in green. Pennsylvania, of course, is purple. And then North Carolina is down here. It's light blue because it is in the process. It is considering joining RGGI, but it's in the very, very early stages, whereas Pennsylvania is right on the cusp, and we'll get into that in more details. So the current proposal for RGGI, so since Pennsylvania is using the Air Pollution Control Act to participate in RGGI, the money that Pennsylvania collects will go into the Clean Air Fund, which is a special fund that already exists under the Air Pollution Control Act, and it's controlled by the Department of Environmental Protection, and they use it to eliminate air pollution. So there are limitations on the way the money can be spent. So you can see here in my picture, I show the money going into the Clean Air Fund, and it can be spent for things like greenhouse gas reduction, energy efficiency, and green energy. Now there's a proposed bill, the RGGI Investments Act, known as Senate Bill 15 and House Bill 1565. If that act passes, then we can expand the way the RGGI funds are being spent. And so that particular act proposes that in addition to putting the money into the Pennsylvania Clean Air Fund, that it would create an energy communities trust fund. And so what that means, that money would be used for fossil fuel worker transition and support for energy communities. So as these power plants reduce their carbon dioxide emissions, some of them will ultimately probably close, particularly the coal-fired power plants, which many of them have closed anyway. A lot of them are on their way to closing. But there are communities where the whole town is essentially centered around that power plant. So the community itself, a lot of the tax money that comes in comes from that power plant to pay for, schools and police and things like that. So not only, those workers that may be displaced will need, training and transition to other jobs, but also the communities themselves will need to be supported until they can get a new economic base for themselves. And then, excuse me, and then the third fund is the Environmental Justice Communities Trust Fund. So an environmental justice community is a community that has been impacted by these power plants, in particular with air pollution. These communities tend to suffer more from asthma and other respiratory illnesses and things like that. So then this money would go to help those communities that have been impacted for years by living near these power plants, and would help by reducing the environmental impacts from these power plants and also increasing economic opportunities for those communities. So some of the benefits of RGGI, these are just a few of the benefits. Carbon dioxide emissions, it's predicted that there'd be a reduction of 31% from the 2019 levels by 2030. There'd be a net increase, this is only just for Pennsylvania, and a net increase of over 30,000 jobs by 2030. So, other states, of course, as well would be increasing jobs, but this number is just for Pennsylvania. The increase of almost $2 billion by 2030 for Pennsylvania, an increase of 9.4 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030 for Pennsylvania. And of course, RGGI is going to decrease the effects of climate change, including the extreme weather and its related costs that we've seen from climate change, the illnesses related to climate change, and the agricultural impacts from climate change. RGGI has been very successful in other states. Like I said before, it's been going strong since 2009. The existing member states, some of the benefits that they've seen, 24% carbon reduction that was directly attributed to RGGI. Over $5 billion in health and productivity benefits, over $4 billion in net economic gains, over 44,000 job years created, and investments in energy efficiency. This has helped reduce electric bills, falling by 5.7%. So that is, I think that's one of the great places where this money could be spent. The more energy efficient you make homes, it's going to help reduce their monthly electric bills. New Jersey, they're using their RGGI money, some of their RGGI money, to electrify buses and light duty trucks, focusing on environmental justice communities. And this includes money to electrify school buses, which I think is great, because if you've ever been by a school at pickup time, you see that whole line of buses with the kids standing there going to their buses, breathing in the fuel from the buses. And if there were electric buses, that would be great, because many kids suffer from asthma, and I think that would be a tremendous help. And of course, the RGGI money is being invested in clean and renewable energy. It's been used to train more than 8,000 workers. In Virginia, one of their focuses for the energy efficiency projects is in public housing. As well, another in Virginia in particular, flood mitigation efforts. So if anybody's familiar with like the Hampton Roads area, that's right there on the coast, they are suffering from, lots and lots of flooding all the time. And so a lot of Virginia's RGGI money is going towards flood preparedness. And there's a lot of military bases in that area that are greatly impacted by these floods. So that's going to help our national security there. Okay, so this is busy picture here, but the big takeaway from this is that this shows the timeline that Pennsylvania has followed for the rulemaking process in order for Pennsylvania to become a member of RGGI. So you can see way back in October of 2019, this is when Governor Wolf first signed the executive action for Pennsylvania to join RGGI under the authority of the Air Pollution Control Act. So all these different steps along the way are all the normal rulemaking hurdles that any regulation needs to go through in Pennsylvania. So it's successfully passed through a lot of these steps. And what we're going to talk about in the next few slides are these two boxes here, which are, we'll call them speed bumps on the way for Pennsylvania to join RGGI. So RGGI has been following the established rulemaking process. It's been approved by all regulatory committees tasked with formal review. So that includes the Environmental Quality Board, the Independent Regulatory Review Commission, and the Attorney General's Office. So the next steps for any regulation would be to go to the Legislative Reference Bureau, known as the LRB. And that arranges for it to be printed in the Pennsylvania Bulletin. And that can take several weeks to happen. So RGGI is ready for it to be published. However, the LRB has said that they're not going to publish RGGI until the Pennsylvania General Assembly decides the fate of RGGI, and we'll go into the details of exactly what that means. Because of the time it would take to publish at this point, Pennsylvania would not be able to participate until the September RGGI auction. So every quarter, RGGI has the auction where the power plants would pay for their allowances and be able to trade the allowances and all that. So there is one in June, but it's at this point, it would be past the deadline to join the June auction for Pennsylvania. So it looks like it would be September. Okay, so the attempts to derail RGGI. So we're going to talk about these different attempts. There's the disapproval resolutions. All of these we're going to be going into more detail. The Carbon Dioxide Cap and Trade Authorization Act and the courts, because of course, the courts. So the disapproval resolution, both the Pennsylvania House and Pennsylvania Senate passed RGGI disapproval resolutions. In the state Senate, the vote was 32-18, and in the state House, the vote was 130-70, and you'll see why those numbers are important in a minute. Some argue that the disapproval resolution is dead because the House didn't vote in time on their own particular resolution. Instead, what they did was they waited for the Senate to pass its version of the disapproval resolution and then voted on that in the House. So that's an argument that some have made that may or may not see its way into the courts, depending on what happens with RGGI. Governor Wolf vetoed the RGGI disapproval resolution on January 10th. So then the General Assembly has 30 calendar days, or what really actually matters is the 10 session days, because it's whichever is longer and the 10 session days are longer, to override his veto with a 2/3 majority. So the Pennsylvania Senate has until March 30th for their override vote. And then once it passes the Senate, then it would move to the House. And then the House would have until June 7th to vote. That date is kind of up in the air because the House has been making some changes to their session days through, because of other things unrelated to RGGI. So they may need to add some days or whatever. So that's kind of rough time frame there for the June 7th. So this would be a close vote. So there's a chance that Governor Wolf's veto could be overridden. So now this is where, because it's like a whole bunch of double negatives here. So you kind of have to think through your head. So overriding Governor Wolf's veto would mean that RGGI would fail, right? So in order for Pennsylvania to join RGGI, you don't want the veto to be overridden, right? Because the veto is vetoing the disapproval resolution. It gets complicated, but anyway, so 34 votes would be needed in the Pennsylvania Senate. And you can see they had 32 for the initial vote, and 136 would be needed in the Pennsylvania House for the veto override. So if these numbers increase in the Senate, if that 32 increases to 34 above, and in the House, if that increases to 136 and above, if those legislators, change their votes such that both those increase, then that would end Pennsylvania's attempt to join RGGI. So, but just, at this point, RGGI has been discussed so much that most of the legislators are, pretty firm in their stance, but there's, some that could be swayed either way. So this is more of a graphical representation so that I could, it's kind of more for me so that I could kind of get a visual of exactly what happened here. So the disapproval resolutions, they're named SCRRR1 and HCRRR1, depending on if it's in the Senate or the House. So it starts in the Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. This just shows that. So let's start over here with the House. So you can see the HCRRR1 started in the ERE committee, was not voted on within 10 session days, and so it died. So that's what I was referencing before when I said some people argued that the House, because they had 10 days after the IRRC approved RGGI, they had 10 days to disapprove of it. So it died in the House, but over in the Senate, they were able to vote within the 10 session days. So they adopted it in the Senate, and then that version moved over to the House. And then on December 15th, they adopted it, went to Governor Wolf's desk. He vetoed it. So then that veto goes back to the Senate. So then if they're going to override that veto, they have to have 2/3 of the Senate. And if that is successful, then it goes to the House, where they would need 2/3 to override it. If that happens, then that would be the final action, with, of course, an asterisk, because everything has an asterisk. So this should be the final action. But if they fail to get the 2/3, they, meaning the RGGI opponents, fail to get the 2/3 vote, then they may switch tactics back to SB 119, which we'll be getting into a minute, and HB 637. And also there's always the chance that it will end up in the courts. So let's see what that means. So SB 119 and HB 637, this is what's known as the Carbon Dioxide Cap and Trade Authorization Act. These are proposed bills that would force RGGI to go through the General Assembly. And in fact, it's the way they're written, it would be more than just RGGI. It's any regulations related to carbon dioxide would have to go through the General Assembly if those bills were to pass. So the Pennsylvania Senate has already voted for and approved Senate Bill 119, and HB 637 is still pending in the Pennsylvania House. If these are approved, similar to what happened with the disapproval resolutions, Governor Wolf can veto the proposed bills, which it's expected that he would, and then they need the 2/3 majority to override his veto. So now let's go into more details about HB 637, which was the one which originally required any regulations on carbon dioxide to go through the General Assembly, including RGGI. But it was recently amended to additionally include a one-time $250 million expenditure on environmental projects, which include carbon capture and storage technology, methane abatement, capping of abandoned wells, stormwater mitigation, and worker transition. So, all those are, good things. Well, you could argue about the carbon capture and storage technology, but, that's a good thing that they're spending it on these environmental projects, but it's kind of an end around to avoid RGGI. So then the other thing about this 637 amendment is that money would come from COVID-19 relief funds. So instead of taking the money from the power plants, which would incentivize them to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions, instead it's taking the $250 million from the COVID-19 relief funds, just a one-time thing, and then but you need to keep in mind RGGI would bring in around $400 million each year. So here's a graphical representation of what I just explained. So this kind of puts a good visual for envisioning what all this means. So RGGI, $400 million per year, coming from the fossil fuel fired power plants. HB 637 takes money from the COVID-19 relief funds, one time $250 million. And then, of course, the courts. So RGGI is already actually in the courts because Governor Wolf has brought a lawsuit against the Legislative Reference Bureau to compel them to publish RGGI. But of course, everything in the courts takes time. So that is proceeding at whatever slow court pace it's proceeding at. In the meantime, I think things will probably be decided before that lawsuit gets a chance to go anywhere. So then, of course, there's also the possibility that even if Pennsylvania does successfully become a member of RGGI, there may be a lawsuit to decide, and the main argument of that lawsuit would be to determine if Governor Wolf has the authority to apply the DEP rulemaking process to propose Pennsylvania's participation in RGGI. So let's go through some of the counter arguments to RGGI and what our response would be to that. So the RGGI opponents argue that Pennsylvania has already decreased its carbon dioxide emissions without RGGI, which is true. Pennsylvania has done a great job of reducing its carbon dioxide emissions. But this is mainly due to the switch from coal to natural gas. But this is going to soon plateau because many of the coal-fired plants have already been replaced. So there's only so much you can do. And then additionally, there are some nuclear plants are looking at closing, but RGGI would help make them more viable. In fact, there was one, I should know the name, but I can't come up with it off the top of my head. But there was a nuclear power plant that actually was going to start the process of closing, but because of RGGI, they're staying open. So that's jobs right there that, with RGGI, there's jobs right there that are being kept. All right, next argument, RGGI will eliminate jobs as regulations make coal-fired plants more expensive. So this is why the RGGI Investments Act is so important, because that would allow the funds from RGGI to help those energy communities transition away from relying on fossil fuel-fired power plants. Without RGGI, those coal-fired plants are probably going to close anyway, and without the RGGI funds, they would be left out in the cold. All right, another argument is joining RGGI will move jobs and emissions to non-RGGI states, and in particular, for Pennsylvania, the non-RGGI states that are around us would be West Virginia and Ohio. So this is known as leakage. So this can be mitigated by working with PJM. PJM is like, they are like the master controllers of the electric grid between different power companies. So they control how the energy is directed. Also, RGGI opponents have overstated the expected leakage. And then, what would really solve the problem, get more states to join RGGI, or even better, have a federal carbon dioxide cap and trade program, because that would, essentially eliminate leakage. Okay, another argument is that RGGI is a tax, not a fee, and taxes need to be approved by the General Assembly. But RGGI is actually a user fee, which makes the polluters pay to pollute. The amount of damage from greenhouse gases far exceeds the fees that RGGI would impose, but we need to start somewhere. Another argument is RGGI is an interstate agreement and needs to be approved by the General Assembly. But actually the way RGGI is structured is that each state determines their own regulations. Therefore, it really would be more accurate to say that Pennsylvania would be participating in RGGI and that Pennsylvania would become a member of RGGI. And let's see, another argument is that Pennsylvanians are opposed to RGGI, which is actually quite the opposite. Polls show that over 70% of Pennsylvanians are in favor of RGGI, and 76% believe climate change is a serious problem that needs to be addressed, which RGGI right now is the best way that Pennsylvania has to combat climate change. And a lot of RGGI opponents say, well, businesses don't support RGGI, but that's not true. There are plenty of businesses that do. Businesses and other organizations, I listed a few here. Solar, of course, supports it. The Energy Efficiency Alliance, with money going towards energy efficiency, that's going to create a lot of jobs, a lot of local jobs, because to do energy efficiency, you need people here in Pennsylvania going to people's houses, helping with these energy efficiency improvements. So these are just a few. There were over 14,000 comments made on RGGI, made to the DEP. So I only looked through a fraction of them. So there are many more. So why RGGI? Well, climate change. RGGI would reduce carbon dioxide emissions. Health. It would save lots of money on health and jobs and the economy. Net increase of over 30,000 jobs by 2030. So let's talk a little bit about climate change. Just as a refresher, climate change is caused by the greenhouse effect. So some sunlight that hits the earth is reflected, some becomes heat. As carbon dioxide increases, more and more of that radiation gets trapped and gets reflected back to the earth, warming our planet. This is just a chart showing the relationship between carbon dioxide and the global temperature. As you can see, this goes all the way back to 1880 and up to 2020, and you can see how things are getting warmer as the carbon dioxide increases. There's many effects of climate change, but I'm just gonna pick one for tonight and talk about how it increases the intensity of hurricanes. And in particular, let's look at Hurricane Ida, because that's one that hit close to home. So when Hurricane Ida crossed the Gulf of Mexico here, the waters were 7 degrees Fahrenheit higher than normal. So here's some from the Philadelphia Inquirer, a couple of quotes about Hurricane Ida. One from Michael Mann, who's a well-known climate scientist from Penn State, basically saying, in short, yeah, this is climate change when referring to Hurricane Ida. And then another piece of information down here that Ida caused $65 billion in damage across the US because it hit a wide swath of the United States. That is huge. Now, of course, Ida might have occurred anyway without climate change, but we know that it was significantly stronger due to climate change. So this is just one example of Ida hitting close to home. So this is just actually a few miles from my house. This is a senior living facility, and this was taken during Ida when it came through. And you can see there's actually water behind this retaining wall. And the photo down here shows this is what it looks like in normal times. So the creek is way over here. So this is how it looks normally. So that is a whole lot of water. The residents of this senior living facility, they had to be evacuated for several weeks while they made repairs from the damage caused by Ida. We had people in our community who lost their homes from Hurricane Ida. Another reason why RGGI, health benefits. It's going to help reduce asthma attacks, respiratory disease, heart disease, cancer, and reduced hospital visits, saves money, and you have a more productive workforce. Jobs that will benefit from RGGI, solar jobs, energy efficiency, nuclear, energy grid workers, electric vehicle charger installers, and many more. So now let's see, I need to, I have a short video that's only a couple minutes long to show you. So let's optimize for the video clip. So let's take a look.
I've been here 18 years. I can say this is the worst of flooding I've seen here in the city of Philadelphia.
Those tornadoes and the flooding that also occurred proved to be deadly here in Montgomery County. 4 people, residents of the county, lost their lives. One of them was inside this home here.
East Market Street at Interstate 83, this major thoroughfare shut down tonight. The current is bashing the bottom of the bridge. It's going to go over the bridge anytime.
Thousands of people remain without power.
There has been a lot of damage. The home and most of the things in it were basically destroyed.
So that video is courtesy of the Clean Power PA Coalition. So what can you do? You can educate your friends, your family, and your neighbors about RGGI. You can contact your state legislators. You can submit letters to the editor about RGGI. So questions?
Okay. That was a really wonderful presentation, Julia. Thank you so much. We got a ton of great information. Now I'm going to call on people who put questions into the chat. And after that, if you want to ask a question, please go to the reactions area, a reactions icon, and raise your hand. Otherwise, I won't be able to see you. Mark Berg, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, I know it's been recorded, but will this slide deck be available?
Sure. Yeah, I don't see why not. Does NVN have a place where we can put it on their site? Abba, I assume this is something we could put on Climate Reality's website as well.
That'd be great.
Yes,
yeah,
we could put it on our site and send you a link to that. Sure.
Thank you.
Douglas White.
Yeah, as I said, we need to know which legislators to contact to kill that disapproval resolution.
Yes. So well, first of all, legislators will listen, to their constituents the most. So you can start with your own legislator. You can look if we're able to send out a follow-up email on this, Leonard, I don't know if that's possible or not, but we can put a link to the votes that both the Pennsylvania Senate and House made on the disapproval resolutions, and that will give you a good idea of where your legislature stands. So that's like probably the best place to start to figure out what their current thinking is on RGGI.
I think we'll be able to put this up on the NVN somewhere, and I would guess that Climate Reality can put it up with their with the slide deck, and we will try to also see if we can email people.
Okay, great. I'm just putting a note to myself to include the link to the vote on the disapproval resolution.
Bill Cousins, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, thank you very much. Two things in response to Doug's question. Two of the senators in this area who are Democrats but had voted against RGGI in one of the early votes are Senators Kane in Delaware County and Tartaglione, who represents an area primarily in Northeast Philadelphia. Now, subsequently, they've come around and have said that they are supportive of RGGI and plan to vote to support the governor's veto. But I think if you're in either Senator Kane's or Tartaglione's district, a letter or email to them sort of thanking them for supporting RGGI and encouraging them to, stick with the governor and support RGGI on that override, on the potential attempt by the Senate to override the veto would be good. The other thing I wanted to mention is the House Bill 637, as part of this amendment that was done in the Appropriations Committee, they have renamed it, and I put the new name in the chat. It's meant to basically confuse and fool people. It's been renamed the Energy Sustainability and Investment Act, if you can believe that. I mean, they, are really trying to peel off at least a few Democrats to get them to vote with the fossil fuel interest because of that $250 million that they're promising to be used for some good purposes. Now, the thing to keep in mind, Pennsylvania missed the first quarter RGGI auction, and Pennsylvania's estimated would have gained about $200 million in that one auction. Missing the second auction will probably miss another $200 million. So just because of the Senate and the House delays, we've already lost more money than would be coming in through this House Bill 637 as amended. So RGGI is going to provide, they're estimating at least $400 million, and it could be considerably more than that per year over the next 8 to 10 years. So that, exceeds by far this paltry $250 million that they are trying to convince us makes 637 palatable for us.
Bill makes some excellent points. And what I would like to add is that because this amendment to 637 happened while the legislators were not in session, a lot of the legislators are not even familiar with what happened with the amendment. When I called my state rep, which is Joe Webster, couple weeks ago, I guess like a week and a half ago, to tell, just to tell them about the 637 amendment. The staff person that I spoke with wasn't even familiar with the amendment. And so he was very grateful that I had called and said, oh yes, I will definitely pass this information along and make sure that Representative Webster, understands all of this. So another part of this whole process is just educating your legislator. They may not even know that this amendment is out there because it was done while they weren't in session. So that would be like step one. Make sure your legislator even knows what's going on. So yes, thank you for that, Bill.
And Julie, to reinforce what you're saying, because it's been relabeled with this, motherhood and apple pie name, energy sustainability. I mean, it sounds like, oh boy, this is going to be supporting getting us to 100% renewable. It's going to support, good climate policy. It sounds on the surface like, oh, a wonderful thing. And I could see a legislator or staff person who's not paying attention could end up voting in favor of it when really it's going to be very damaging if it passes.
Right. The old bait and switch. Yep.
Carol Aronoff.
Yes, well, my question has sort of been indirectly answered. I was since NVN is everybody lives in Northwest Philly. I guess we have guests from other places. I was just curious about our local legislators, how they voted.
Yes, I think for the most part, most of the Philadelphia area legislators support RGGI, with the exception previously mentioned of Kane and Tartaglione, who have now, gone over to support RGGI. So that shows that legislators can be affected. So that's why it's important to get the word out.
Okay. So then I guess there's no point. I mean, I guess we could send letters that say thanks or something like that.
Letters that say thanks. But I encourage you to take a look at the vote. I don't have it up right now. Let's see if I'll work on bringing that up so we can take a look. But in the meantime, we can answer some other questions.
I think to Julia's point, even if your man or woman, whoever your representative or senator was or is, even if they have been supportive of RGGI in the past, because this 637 is so sneaky with the name they've given it, it's valuable to still contact them and say, look out, this is a wolf in sheep's clothing or a pig that has had lipstick put on it, and that you need to watch out and make sure you don't make a mistake and vote in favor of this thing that is really going to be quite damaging.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Yes.
Jack Malinowski.
I had heard that Virginia, under its new Republican governor, made an very early announcement to withdraw from the initiative after Virginia had been solidly inside. And I was just wondering what the overall impact in terms of weakening the RGGI coalition.
Yes, that's an excellent question. So there's two parts to that question. So first, let's talk about the impact to Virginia, in particular with the flood preparedness that I was talking about before. I mean, these are projects that, take a long time to build, to do. And so if you're starting, a major construction project, depending on these funds, and then the rug gets pulled out from under you, I mean, first of all, that's a waste of money that's, been spent on the upfront cost of the construction, but also it's such a letdown to those communities that were, finally help is here to help us with all this flooding, and then it's gone. In terms of its impact on Pennsylvania, that of course is something that RGGI opponents have grabbed onto and said, well, look, Virginia doesn't even want it, but really it's Virginia's governor doesn't want it. Polls of Virginians have shown that that Virginians themselves overwhelmingly like RGGI, especially now that they're starting to see some of the benefits of it. There's when the energy efficiency projects have already started to get underway. They hear, about these plans for this flood preparedness. So Virginians themselves overwhelmingly support it. But RGGI opponents, the Pennsylvania RGGI opponents, they point to Virginia's governor and say, oh, look, RGGI didn't work out for Virginia, isn't working out. They want to pull out. So that's unfortunately going to be a talking point that RGGI opponents use. I do have the vote up. Let me share my screen here of, okay, so this was the House. So this shows, and the way this is organized is it has the Republicans first in alphabetical order, and then the Democrats in alphabetical order. It took me a while to figure that out because, you get down to the Z's and then it starts over with B's and wait, what sort of alphabetical order is this? But that's the way it's organized. So that kind of helps you make sense of, if you're trying to find your specific legislator on this list, that helps you figure out, where they're going to be. So this was the House vote. And this was on the disapproval resolution. So we'll scroll through here, but like I said, we'll put, I should put this in the chat. Let me do that.
But I just had a comment about that. Friends I know in Delaware County lobbied with Senator Kane, who is a relatively new member of the Senate, and he's a labor union member, and he was leaning toward being following the propaganda from the industry saying about jobs and so forth. And some serious lobbying helped educate him, and he turned out to vote to sustain Governor Wolf's veto. So it just teaches us that we should pay attention to even our possible friends to make sure that they're up on all the information.
Yes, that is an excellent point. Okay, so now let's see. Now you should be able to see the Senate vote here for the disapproval resolution. So that gives you a place to start to look to see where your legislator stands on this issue. All right, other questions?
Patricia Libby.
Yes, I have, a pretty simple question. I had heard that Bitcoin was produced by burning massive amounts of what's called dirty coal. Will RGGI also be affecting the Bitcoin manufacturers? Are they going to be hiking their prices so that they can pay for what they're doing to our environment?
Yes, that is a great question. So as we've all heard that, not only Bitcoin, but all cryptocurrency, some more than others, have an environmental impact because of the electricity needed for the Bitcoins. So that right there is a good example of why we need RGGI, because it will disincentivize the power plants that produce a lot of carbon dioxide, and it will instead help renewable energy be the source for these cryptocurrencies.
All right. Well, I think that ends our questions. I'm going to stop the recording